Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we are breaking down the betting on Week 4 SEC football action. Today, we're talking about the Georgia State Panthers and the Auburn Tigers in a game that kicks off at 4 p.m. Eastern at Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday. The game will be televised on the SEC Network. From a betting perspective, this line opened Auburn minus 23 on Sunday. It has crept up across the week. At the time this video was recorded, it's all the way up to Auburn minus 27. The over-under on the game opened at 58.5, and it has dropped actually to 57. Bringing our SEC betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what do you make of this non-conference matchup, the last one of the year for the Tigers?
Surprise, upset alert. No, I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. But we did see some resistance at 27.5 on the line. So we'll see if that changes. But for now, it looks like it might hold under 28, at least until right before kickoff. But Nick, why don't you take us through Nick's news and notes and let us know what's going on around the Auburn football program?
Sure. So first, let's quick hit on the weather and injury situation. The weather forecast for Saturday in Auburn is beautiful. It's a high of 79, partly cloudy, winds at about 7-8 miles an hour. So nothing too crazy that we should be concerned about from a betting perspective. On the injury side of things, also a pretty clean slate. There are 3 or 4 guys for Auburn that are listed as questionable for Saturday, but nothing that should worry you on the betting front. Getting into the news and notes, I would we should really take this back to the Week 3 Auburn game first and talk about how we saw them stand toe-to-toe with who's now number 6 in the nation, Penn State, in Happy Valley in front of 100,000 people, and had a chance to win that game. And maybe you could argue should have won that game or at least push that game to overtime at some point. But there's 3 things I can take away. Is A, what a great atmosphere. I mean, it was so good to see that after what we had to watch in 2020. It felt like we were back to 2019 type of atmosphere there. B, it was one of those rare Big Ten SEC matchups that actually lived up to the billing. You had a couple of top 25 teams, and it was as advertised. Very good game to watch and a good game to bet, too. You're on the edge of your seat no matter which side of that game you had or the total, for that matter. And then C, although Auburn didn't win, they didn't look out of place either. And that was important to me as we're getting ready to get into SEC play with a new coach there with Brian Harsin, trying to figure out what they're like post Gus Malzahn. Is this going to be a transition year? I mean, I think we figured out, A, Auburn can run the ball, and B, Auburn can stop the run. And so there's nothing here that suggests Auburn is going to be anything but a quality opponent in the SEC West that, by the way, looks like it has 4 or 5 pretty good teams. So this should be a really interesting race once we get through what is my next point here, is the last non-conference game of the season for Auburn. They chose to load all 4 of their non-conference games at the beginning of this schedule, which is probably good when you have a new coach installing a new system. I know that trip to Week 3 and trip to Penn State in Week 3 is probably not exactly like a prep game, but 3 of those 4 games that they have on this schedule should really be for Harsin installing his culture, installing his offense, installing the defensive philosophy. And so we're going to get a good idea coming out of this game, if nothing else, exactly what Brian Harsin wants to be about at Auburn before we get into the gauntlet of an 8-game SEC schedule. Now, the last thing I point out to you, Christopher, Georgia State just picked up its first win on Saturday. After a 33-point loss to a 33-point loss to Army in Week 1 and a 42-point loss to North Carolina in Week 2. They finally found a W at home against Charlotte. They won 20-9. And that was mostly a result of them getting their ground game going. Had 284 yards rushing on 50 carries there for the Panthers. So a little bit of momentum for them coming into this game. But like you said, I don't know that I'm sounding the upset alarm. What are you seeing from this one?
Yeah, so Sean Elliott is the head coach at Georgia State, and SEC fans may remember him for being the offensive line coach at South Carolina under Steve Spurrier and Will Muschamp. And he was also the interim head coach at South Carolina in 2015 for a while. So as you would expect from a former SEC offensive line coach, they're not bad at the line of scrimmage for a group of 5 team. But where they are bad is in the passing game on both sides of the ball. They're 129th in opponent passer rating in the FBS. That's out of 130 teams. And they're not much better at 118th in passer rating on offense. And on the other side of the ball, I mean, we know Auburn can run the ball. This is probably the best backfield in the SEC, and they're leading the nation in yards per carry. They're coming into the season, I thought Tank Bigsby was maybe the most talented, best running back in the SEC. But Jarquez Hunter maybe even better than Tank Bixby is. There's been some cool stories about his weight room prowess. Sort of reminds me of Jalen Hurts in high school. And you look at the game against Penn State, and a lot of blame usually goes to Bo Nix in these kind of situations, but I thought he played well enough in this game. Not perfect, not all SEC, but better than I expected. And the receivers didn't play well enough. Brian Harsin seemed to place a lot of blame on the receivers if you sift through his post-game comments and some of his comments early this week. And Nix, he's at a 76% adjusted completion percentage, according to Pro Football Focus, which is pretty good. And his receivers have just got to help him out a little bit more. They got to know where to be. They got to not drop the ball. They got to get open. And, that's especially true. Look at Auburn's schedule after this game. The next 5 games, I believe, are at LSU versus Georgia, at Arkansas versus Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. I mean, yikes, that's a murderer's row right there. And they need to make sure that their passing game is on track. And this is their last chance to really get that together before that schedule hits. And I mean, I know this is a sandwich spot in between the valleys, Happy Valley last week, Death Valley next week. And we'll see how Auburn responds after kind of a tough emotional road game. But Georgia State's completed only 51.6% of their passes. And AL.com graded the Auburn defensive backs with an F in the game against Penn State. Too many big plays, too many open guys. And so I would expect maybe a tough film session for them this week. They'll be ready to go. And I don't think they'll take Georgia State lightly, given that probably got to shoot out all week and they need a good performance to get the coaches off their back. So I would expect Auburn to thoroughly dominate on both sides of the ball in the passing game. But Nick, how are you betting this game, and where are we going to make some money this week?
Yeah, so I look back at how Auburn performed in week 1 against Akron and week 2 against Alabama State. Not only did they win, they blew them out to the point in which this 27 doesn't feel like quite enough to be laying for me. I don't expect that Georgia State's going to be much better than maybe what we saw from Akron or, along those lines. So give me Auburn minus 27. I kind of would pause if we got up to 28. If that line continues to move in this direction, but I like Auburn minus 27. And to that point, in both of those games, Auburn by themselves was hitting over 57. So if you think that this running game is as stout as it's looked, and that Bo Nix is going to be throwing the ball aggressively, trying to get that side of the offense figured out, I think they can take it close to the over on their own. And I think Georgia State can contribute a score or two to help us get there along the way. So give me the over 57 as well. How do you see this?
Yeah, stole the words right out of my mouth. I like Auburn minus 27, over 57. And definitely at least be careful about where you're shopping around for this line. Nick mentioned 28 is the key number. 27 is also a key number. So you can see some fluctuation between 27, 27 and a half, and 28 as we lead into this game. So definitely try to shop around and find the best line. If you can get a 27 and you want to side with us with Auburn, that's great. And on the total, completely agree with everything Nick said there. I think it's actually Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator, that has the reputation among sharp bettors for not calling off the pressure when they have a big lead late. He's got a reputation for still throwing the ball, still pushing things, even with big leads late in the fourth quarter. So over 57, I'm not too worried about that, especially with as many points I think Auburn is capable of scoring in this game. So I'm going minus 27 over 57, and Nick is as well. And for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll catch you next week.